Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I'm really excited to be chatting today about the link between behavior and nutrition. That is going to be such an interesting topic for us to chat about. But Lisa, before we dive in, before we go ahead with discussing that, there's something I have been asking everyone. And if you guys follow our lives, you know that I'm asking everyone this, and it's because of our Vet Rehab Summit on the 13th of November. So Lisa, before we jump into our topic, will you please tell me what is the research article that you quote most often, or what is the research that's really made the biggest impact on your way of thinking?
It was really hard to narrow down a particular research paper, so it's more a theme really. And my background was primarily in humans before I came into the pet world. So in human terms, it was when I started to find research that was linking dietary choices and sort of nutritional choices with aggression and violence in humans. So I really sort of got into that, and then I noticed that lots of papers were being published linking nutrient deficiencies with aggression and violence. So that was sort of like the research. I really thought, hang on, there has got to be a link here between nutrition and behavior. And then, interestingly, it does translate over to the pet world as well. So we do see that there are nutrient deficiencies, and we can link it to behavioral concerns as well. But in addition to that, in the pet world, it's just again looking at those nutrient deficiencies and the knock-on effect. So it's that theme really, and more and more research is appearing, and I'm very science-based. I will always look at the research, and ultimately as new research comes out, it doesn't bother me sort of reassessing my practice, and that's what we really need to do, isn't it? We need to watch the data as it comes out and think, is this still applicable? So for me, it was that really, those nutrient deficiencies and the links with aggression and violence.
Whoa. So basically, that link goes throughout people, animals. That's really incredible to think about. Yeah. So, guys, now I have asked my little Vet Rehab Summit question. If you do not know about the Vet Rehab Summit, it is on the 13th of November. It's going to be amazing. Please block your calendars. And join us live on the 13th of November. Our theme is research meets reality, and it's going to be phenomenal. So I have another announcement before we actually dive into chatting about this, and that is that we are running a competition today. Steph Evans from Animal Therapy Business Planner has given us a business planner to give away as a prize today. And I love it. She's a new vet rehabber in our field, and she has created a business planner. So it's beautiful. You guys isn't it just beautiful? I hope you guys have seen the photos and things. But what I'm asking you to do for us today, one of the questions that I have is, who uses a business plan, like a paperback business planner, and who uses a computer-based, appointment system, planning system, whatever that may be? And whichever one you use, for you to enter this competition, I want a photo of your calendar, of your business planner, of your whatever you're using, where the 13th of November is blocked off in like big red Vet Rehab Summit. So share that photo with us, and share that photo with us in the comments, and you might win that today. Steph is based either in the UK or America, but if you're in either of those regions, she will cover the shipping. And if you're in a remote area like South Africa, we'll need to make a little bit of a plan, and you'll have to help cover that cost, but the business planner will still be coming your way. So, okay, so without any further ado, Lisa, please introduce yourself and what it is that you do. So many of our vet rehabbers have been excited about this chat, so I'm really excited to have you. Yeah, please introduce yourself a bit.
So I'm Lisa Hannaby of Nourish and Nourish Education and Training. So that's sort of the education side of things. So Nourish is a play on psychology, so neuron, and nourish, so nutrition. My background primarily was, as I mentioned earlier, in human psychology. So for a number of years, I worked with children and families, and also with young offenders. So that's where the aggression and violence came in, and that sort of link between nutrient deficiency seen in the prison system. So that was my background for quite a period of time. In that time as well, I also went into education. So I then went into lecturing in further education and higher education. So that's sort of college and university level. And that was health and social care. So primarily psychology and sociology. So what actually goes on in society. And through all of that experience, I started to wonder why we weren't looking at nutrition. I thought, with all of the children and families and young offenders I was working with, I was like, why is nutrition not a thing? We had all of our screening tools, and we were talking about life events and things, but we were never looking at nutrition. So that's when I got really interested in nutrition in the human side. Fast forwarded a couple of years, and I wanted a breather from humans. So I decided to move into the pet world. I retrained as a groomer, and then I shortly set up a home boarding business, a cattery business, and a raw food store as well, because of that link with nutrition. So in amongst all of that, I decided that I didn't know enough, so I pursued some postgrad biochemistry study and a master's in human nutrition, because I'm very much, I want to know the answer to things. I'm like that really annoying toddler that's like, but why? But why? So I'm always trying to find sort of answers to questions, and I love knowing the mechanism. It's sort of like, don't tell me that something happens, tell me how it happens, and that's how I kind of get to grips. So yeah, this is where Nourish is sort of at. So I work with both humans and pets, nutrition and psychology, and I do mostly freelance, so freelance writing for human and pet companies, and also consultancy with education because of my teaching background, and I've previously developed qualifications. It's those sort of skills, and we've just launched the first Ofqual regulated course in canine nutrition. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell, really.
Oh, sounds very interesting. Like a really cool journey that you've been on. I like the shift into the canine world. Good job.
Yeah, I much prefer animals to humans.
You're talking to the right crowd here. We all get that. So welcome to everyone who's joined us live. Meg, hi. And Jasmine, who is very excited for this live. And nice to see that natural nutrition is getting some airtime. Agreed. It's not something we talk about enough. And just to put it out there, I actually really know very little about nutrition. So to all of our viewers, you guys are going to help me today, because I'm going to be asking the stupid questions. And if you want to get some proper questions on air, please ask them. Please join us, join the conversation, share your questions with Lisa, so that we can really get to the bottom of understanding what this link is between nutrition and behavior. If you guys have just joined us and you missed my competition announcement, Steph Evans has given us a animal therapy business planner. It is beautiful. If you haven't seen the photos and the videos of it, we've been sharing them all over social media. It's really, really cool. So if you want one, you can win one today if you share a picture with us in the comments of your business planner, whether it's an online system or a book or something on your desk. Share a photo where you have the 13th of November blocked off for the Vet Rehab Summit, because you're going to be joining us live. Okay, so Sophie, hi, thanks for joining us. Natasha, I hope that you can make it as well. And wherever you guys are in the world, let us know. We really want to have you joining in the conversation. If you're watching from within our group, I might not be able to see your name on the comments, but I can read and see your comments. So share them. And if you want me to know who you are, just write your name at the bottom. That would be great. Okay, Lisa, so what is the link between nutrition and behavior? Let's start there.
it's huge, and this is it just becomes so big, and you can just go off on so many different tangents, because if we think about behavior, what is behavior? And you can think about feelings that influence behavior and things, but ultimately it's that there are these biochemical reactions that occur in the body, which then we then have the behavior as a response. So we can think about behavior in terms of neurotransmitter synthesis. So as we know, neurotransmitters are those chemical messengers which are huge influences on our behavior. So we've got serotonin, which makes us feel kind of good and happy, and we get all those nice feelings. We've got dopamine, which is important in reward and concentration to an extent. But if we think about these chemical messengers which give us those feelings and ultimately influence our behavior, they've got to be built by something. They don't just appear, do they? So where do we get these compounds that make these chemical messengers? And while the body can synthesize certain compounds itself, a lot of that has to come from the diet. So if we aren't including these compounds to make these chemical messengers, then we don't get these chemical messengers to tell us how to behave and how to feel. So we've got this concept of we can use diet as the building blocks to these chemical messengers which can influence our behavior. But then in addition, we can go off down another route, and we can produce these neurotransmitters in our guts. And as we know, when we're eating, our food goes into our gut. So we then have that other mechanism by which this occurs. So the gut microbiome is getting a lot of attention. I mean, you've probably seen research that's popping up. We're paying a lot of attention to it. Not only the gut microbiome, we're paying attention to the oral microbiome, the skin microbiome. It's these communities of microbes, bacteria that live within us and on us, and the same occurs in our pets, in our dogs. So these our gut microbiome, we have this community of bacteria, and depending on the bacteria that's there, they can produce different neurotransmitters as well. And we know that different diets can populate these bacteria. So certain food compounds can make certain bacteria thrive, and then other food components can make other bacteria thrive. So for example, we've got certain bacteria that can help produce serotonin. We've got certain bacteria that can help produce dopamine. So we have that other mechanism. And this is why fiber is getting a huge amount of interest, because fiber it's a carbohydrate, and as much as we demonize carbohydrates, fiber is that insoluble, it's the undigested carbohydrate. So it makes its way through the digestive system, and then it can be fermented in the gut. And then in this process, these metabolites are produced, which can then help to produce neurotransmitters and create that communication from the gut to the brain. And we do have this bidirectional communication all the time. And this is what's really interesting, because we have like the nervous system direction, the bidirectional communication, we've got hormonal, and it's just anything that we eat can then talk to the brain, which I just find amazing.
Yeah, that's a really amazing thing to think about. So I just want to say hi to everyone else who's joined us and commented. Hi, Rachel, and hi, Callista. Thanks for joining us from a cold and wet Cape Town. I'm sorry to hear that it's cold and wet. It's not my favorite weather in the winter, especially. So that's quite a lot to wrap your head around, because I mean, essentially we are kind of familiar with the idea of thinking about the role that nutrition plays in certain pathologies, for example, right? We know that it can increase the likelihood of yeast infections or something like that. And of course, it has an impact on like arthritis and inflammation in the body. So we're kind of okay with that thought, but to think, okay, it also has an impact on the actual the neurotransmitters and hormones that are impacting our emotions. That's quite, that's a bit of a different thinking pattern. So I'd really like to hear from you guys if this conversation is bringing up some kind of examples have you had experience for yourselves with your own animals or with clients' animals where you've seen a change in their behavior that comes from a change in diet? Please share that with me. I can think of one where but it's a horse, it's not a dog, and I'd love to just like hear what you think about that, because it was a very quick, very very big change in her. And she's a mare and she was hormonal, but she became very aggressive and very agitated. So agitated and aggressive, which is not a good combination in a horse. And we put her onto a herbal supplement for mares, and she within a few days was back to her very sweet, very kind self. And so supplements are something that we're feeding them, but how does that link back into kind of their diet? And how do we, are there things missing in their diet? Should we be looking at adding supplements, or should we be looking at actually addressing the diet?
And this, I mean, one of the most common things that we do see that does influence behavior is the inflammatory response. So if there is anything in the body that creates this inflammatory response, and we can look at nutrition, because if we're including any part of the diet that does create an inflammatory response in the body, then we do have this inflammatory model, shall we say, of aggressive behavior, hypersensitive behavior, stress, anxiety, fear, even, because it's part of a stress response as well, isn't it? So even if food sensitivities, we can also link to behavior, because when we look at gut health, we have this barrier in the gut which maintains the integrity, and if we have compromised this gut integrity, then bacteria particles can be translocated from the gut, which can then create body-wide inflammation, and it does then have an impact on behavior. And we often liken this, I don't know if you think about sickness behavior. So in humans, when we're feeling quite poorly, we just want to sit on the sofa and we want to remove ourselves, don't we? We get quite lethargic, but we do have this concept of sickness behavior. And even like in cats, for example, when they have the in rats, sorry, when they are infected with toxoplasmosis, they are then attracted to the urine of cats, which then takes them to the cat, so the cat can actually eat them. So we have this mechanism where they go against their survival instinct just because they're infected. So we do have this concept of sickness behavior, and it can be through anything that is then ingested, and it's all down to this inflammatory response, this immune response. So we have got to be thinking about not necessarily just what we're providing in the diet, but as you say, everything else that's going on that could potentially be causing this inflammation, and then we can use supplements to help counteract this inflammatory response, reduce this sickness behavior. So yeah, we are linking a lot of different behavioral concerns and changes in behavior to deficits in certain nutrients. So aggression is one of them, anxiety is another. I did make some lists of some studies which I knew you would like. So in 2008, there was a research paper, and they linked low levels of omega-3 fatty acids, magnesium and zinc in canine behavioural disorders. So when they actually supplemented omega, zinc and magnesium, the canine behaviour disorders actually improved. So again, we're sort of looking at that nutrient deficiency there. We've actually, there are a number of studies, but one in particular in 2008, low levels of omega-3 fatty acids were linked with aggression in dogs. So, and there's a theory behind this. So it's quite a simplistic and reductionist theory, but it's more to do actually with the imbalance between omega-6 and omega-3. So we're always told to increase our omega-3. So these are our good fats, when we get from fatty fish and things. And omega-6 is primarily when we're eating all of the oils that we shouldn't eat, and they tend to go rancid. So it's this imbalance between the omega-6 and the omega-3, and it's thought that because the brain is primarily fat, omega-6, for want of a better phrase, it sort of makes things less flexible, which affect the transmission of those neurotransmitters, whereas omega-3 makes it more flexible, which then aids the transmission. So it's very reductionist and simplistic, but it's thought that occurs, and that's why omega-3 is linked. So in cases of aggression, we do have low levels of omega-3. There was some data in the 1990s, which we are developing, but we've linked in humans, and we have noticed it in dogs as well. So aggressive males are more. It's more common that they will have a high copper to zinc ratio. So when you balance the copper to zinc ratio in terms of nutrients, then they're less violent and less likely to engage in assaultive behaviour, which is just amazing that they can link it to a nutrient. So it wasn't necessarily about bringing the copper down, it was about increasing the zinc, because ultimately if you've got low zinc, then copper levels increase. And the thing we've got to consider with minerals is year on year, our soils are becoming more and more depleted. So as much as we might think that we're providing these nutrient dense diets, the soils are quite depleted. So we've got to be considering the food that we're providing and where we source it from. And actually, is it, some people will say, oh, actually, I'm not providing the foods with all of these nutrients in, but then on the same, some people will be, but actually where they're sourcing it from might not be that great to have the nutrient composition in there. There was another really interesting study, which is quite gruesome as well. There were some hamsters that, and we always do this to the really small little creatures, don't we? We're quite horrible. But there was some hamsters in, I think this was in the 90s as well. And when they were deficient in niacin, so vitamin B3, and they actually started to eat each other and be really violent towards each other. And then when they supplemented the diet with B3, that violent behaviour improved, which,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. Okay, so you've spoken about omega-3, zinc, and vitamin B3. Megan is asking, is there a link between specific ingredients in dog food and certain behavioral issues? So if you could expand on that, that would be great.
Yeah, so more often than not, we tend to link high sugar diet with impulsivity and hyperactive behaviour. This is more commonly seen in children. So, if you've got children that are addicted to sugar, then when you start pulling the sugar down, then you tend to reduce the impulsivity and the hyperactivity. So, and equally in dogs, we don't have this dietary requirement for carbohydrates as much as they don't have a need. They can, although carbohydrates are a great source of glucose, dogs are more than capable of providing and synthesizing glucose from other sources. So they don't necessarily need a high carbohydrate diet. What they do need is protein, and they have an increased capacity for fat, to use fat as energy. So dogs do need protein and fat. They don't have a dietary need for carbohydrates. So if you do have the sort of high carby, sort of simple sugar diet, then there are links between that and impulsivity and hyperactivity in dogs. And you do see that. I mean, when I used to do boarding, when dogs would come in with certain brands, I knew exactly how they were going to behave. And then if you swapped out the food for something different, then you would see an immediate calming in their behavior. So we do see that in dogs, definitely. And to an extent cats, because equally cats don't have a carbohydrate need either. They have a really high protein need, and equally they can utilize fat. So the goes really, cats just need that protein and that fat. They don't need the simple sugars from the carbohydrates.
Okay, so guys, I'm going to repeat. I am quite in the dark here, so you guys need to be asking questions. Please help me out, okay? But my next question for you, Lisa, would be, how quickly would you see a change in behavior when you address a dietary issue? So either an imbalance or a deficiency or whatever it may be. How quickly can you expect to see a change?
See, this is a brilliant question, and I wish I had the answer. Honestly, I do. And that's not a cop out. I promise it's not a cop out. I mean, in some studies, when we've looked at humans and there's been a deficiency, so for example, in some older people, there's been a deficiency in vitamin B12, and they've been quite disorientated and quite sort of crazy, for want of a better phrase. When a B12 injection has been administered, then symptoms have reduced within sort of like 72 hours. So it can be that quick, but then, that's quite an intense, it's a B12 injection. So it's a therapeutic dose. But in terms of diet, it would be great to say, over a couple of weeks, then you would see an improvement. But we've also then got to consider it's not necessarily just about the diet that you're providing, but actually, the age old, you are what you eat. Well, you're not, you're what you absorb and utilize. And there could be a reason why you or your dog are not utilizing those nutrients. So there could be malabsorption. So that if there are nutrient deficiencies, it could be that you haven't provided a diet that contains them, but then equally there could be issues in the digestive system. So for example, you haven't got enough stomach acid, so it doesn't start that protein digestion, it doesn't start the breakdown of the compounds. You could have malabsorption issues from inflammation or a range of issues. You could have poor pancreatic function, so the enzymes aren't produced. Again, you aren't digesting that food. And then equally, when the absorption occurs, it might not occur. But then there are also genetic reasons why that might not occur. So we see this in humans and in dogs. So when, as we know, our genes tell our body what to do. So they tell your skin cells that they're going to be a skin cell. They tell your hair cell that they're going to be, a hair. But you can be born with little snips, little polymorphisms on these genes, which means that the messages don't get to the cells and they don't get to the parts of the body that they need to. So the part of the body doesn't know what it needs to do. And this can happen with enzymes as well. So certain enzymes are not produced as much as they should be. So if you've got an enzyme that needs to help the conversion of something to a nutrient and that doesn't occur, then you might not know about that because you don't know about your genes and you don't know about your dog's genes. You might be filling your dog with leafy greens, for example, and then still wondering why there might be a slight folate deficiency. So you've got to consider that, obviously with the best will in the world, you want to provide this nutrient dense diet, but there can be malabsorption issues and there can also be genetic reasons why you can't utilize the nutrients. And that's a discussion to have with qualified practitioners and whether there needs to be supplemental use of particular nutrients. But this is it's it'd be great to say, well, including this in your diet, and that's the ultimate aim. If you have this well-rounded nutrient dense diet, then that is great. But then equally, if you're still finding that things aren't improving, then it's like, okay, but why is this not improving, and what can we do?
Okay, so we have a question from April. I'm so glad she's asked it. But have you found a link between feeding a raw diet compared to a kibble? So let's talk about raw food.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a raw advocate. And again, this is, it's not about bashing a particular food or anything. For me, it's just looking at the science and looking at the nutritional needs of pets. So I look at the pet, whether it's a cat or a dog, and I just look, okay, what do they need to survive, and how can we provide that? And as far as I'm concerned, when food is in its whole form, it's more bioavailable. They can digest it, they can utilize it, those nutrients can be utilized in the body. And I mean, I think I'm possibly in a really good position because I have worked, I have done dog boarding and I have got the cattery. So I think from that point of view, the dogs that I have seen, when they have been switched from a kibble diet to a raw diet, then there have been changes in behaviour. I think everybody knows the Luminous kibble brand, when the dogs are absolutely crazy, and then when they've moved over to a raw food diet, then they do seem much calmer. So absolutely. And interestingly with cats, I notice that they don't seem to be as impulsive, and they just don't seem as aggressive. And I know that sounds quite an odd thing to say, but I mean, I've got a ginger Tom Maine Coon, and if anybody's got a ginger cat, then they'll know that they're really feisty. They kind of live up to that stereotype that everyone says, a feisty redhead. He really is. But then when he switched to a raw diet, he's just much more calm, much more chilled out. And this is purely anecdotal, and I'd love there to be a longitudinal study, in terms of looking at. But we can look at the the nutrient deficiencies. So even if we just focus on the nutrient deficiencies, and we know that there are commercial foods that don't stand up to the mark, they don't hit the nutrient needs. So even if we just look at that data and say, well, okay, we know that there are, we can associate violent and aggressive behavior with deficiencies in X, Y, and Z. And then we look at the raw diet that can provide these nutrients in their bioavailable, they can be readily utilized. Then even if we just look at that mechanism, then we can see that it can occur. So yeah, there are plenty of anecdotal links, but even stepping back and looking at that data, that there are.
Okay, great. Yasmin says that raw nutrition is one of the most important tools she uses in her canine clinic. Even if people aren't comfortable with raw, helping owners understand how to understand pet food ingredients and or adding some fresh, anything is better than nothing. So that's really great. And I mean, that really brings us to sort of the point of having this conversation, right? It's great to chat about nutrition, but we're not nutritionists, most of us. We're veterinary rehabilitation therapists. And so how does understanding this link really help us with our patients? At the end of the day, that's what we need to know, right? So how, a lot of us deal with aggression, and that's a really challenging thing for us to deal with, but it is also not kind of our most challenging thing, because we have a kind, slow, gentle way of working with and approaching these dogs. And so most of the time we can handle a dog with a little bit of an aggression issue. But if we do have aggressive dogs, should we be chatting to the owner about what is the dog eating? Can we change their diet? Can we adjust it? And do we so as non-nutritionists, Lisa, should we be doing that? Should we be having that conversation and saying, look, there is a link between behavior and nutrition? Should we be referring them to a nutritionist to have that dealt with? Or is there an easy switch that we can make for them and say, let's try this for a period and see how your dog responds?
I think, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head. For in your roles, you will deal with aggression, and I wonder to what extent that aggression is potentially linked to pain, because we know that pain manifests in and we can look at pain as a behavior as well, can't we? So when we then take another step back and see how it links, there are certain nutrients that are associated with improved pain scores. So vitamin C is a really, really safe one, and that's getting a lot of attention. Vitamin D, for example. And then, if we're looking at inflammation, we're looking at this hypersensitivity, this visceral hypersensitivity. So we can also look at sort of inflammation. Okay, so what's causing the inflammation in the body? So they might have this chronic condition that you're working with them to address, but then equally, if their nutrition isn't on point and their nutrition could be contributing to the inflammation in the body, then I think that's a really worthwhile thing to explore, because, if you are feeding a food that is contributing to inflammation, then you will then increase this visceral hypersensitivity, which will increase their pain. So it has this knock-on effect, which then could make them aggressive and act out. So I think it's certainly something to consider. It's a conversation to have. What food are you feeding, and potentially is it inflammatory? And we know that we do have these high carby, high sugar, high fat, and saturated fat diets that can contribute to inflammation. So then, as much as it's a fad in the human world, this anti-inflammatory diet, shall we say, there are foods that you can include in the diet that are anti-inflammatory. But generally, when you actually step back, when you just provide this whole food fresh diet, then you're already creating that baseline that isn't inflammatory. And equally, you know, you can include foods in the diet that are anti-inflammatory. So you've got your omega-3 fatty acids, you've got your polyphenols, you know, anything to reduce that oxidative stress in the body. So there are foods that you then can include. So yeah, there's definitely scope to explore nutrients that can, you know, support pain, pain perception, shall we say. And you know, and if you do have a diet like vitamin C, it's a water soluble vitamin, so it can be broken down by heat. So if you have got commercially processed diets that are, you know, they're processed through high heat, then you probably will have a deficiency in many of the water soluble vitamins. And then equally in some of the commercial diets, you do have this rancidity of the fat. So you do create, you know, you do have low levels of omega-3. So if you are feeding a commercially processed diet, then it's always best to add some omega-3s onto the diet anyway, because they're not stable. They can go rancid very, very quickly. So it is about maintaining that balance. So, you know, adding omega-3 to the diet could definitely be something to consider. And equally, if, you know, as practitioners, you do think that there is scope and nutrition is playing a part, then you know, refer on. And I think this is the really important thing, isn't it? That everybody has their own skill set, and it's about bringing everybody together and saying, what can we do to support this animal? So you as the, you know, the first point of contact, because you're involved in this rehabilitation, but through your screening and through your conversations, you can be like, actually, there's something that's not sitting there. I think it could be worked with. Then, you know, get somebody involved, you know, have a referral and see what you can do. And it could just be, you know, really small changes that could really support that animal.
Yeah, I love so much of what you've just said, because you've highlighted the importance of having a multidisciplinary team approach in working with the dogs. And I mean, you guys know that that's one of our massive things is we're working towards unity. We're working towards working together with a team. We all have our areas of speciality. We all have the things that we're good at, and we should be working together with others to complement one another. And I really love that. And you've also said that essentially, if there's a chronic condition, arthritis is a great example, but it's just one of many, then not addressing the diet actually means that we're just continuing to fight a losing battle, right? Like, we can do all that we want, but if the dog continues on a diet that promotes inflammation in the body, all of our anti-inflammatory tools are just going to keep working against what's already in the body. So we could be coming at it from multiple angles, and we should be. So I really like that. And like, how easy is it to discuss that with a client? Because all you really need to say is that, you know, these things are working against one another. For us to really make progress, we need them all to be moving in the same direction. So let's get the nutrition sorted out. Let's get your diet sorted out. I really love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can be, you know, ultimately nutrition in its whole food sense is a really safe approach, isn't it? You know, you're not saying, you know, we're going to go and add all of these supplements into the diet and consider dosage and things. It's actually just about, you know, nutrition is very safe, and it's a great place to start. And then, you know, equally, when more complex cases are, you know, prevalent, then that's when you can say, okay, well, actually there needs to be a bit more going on here, and, you know, discussions with a practitioner.
Okay, so I like that you've just taken us there, because I would like to talk a little bit about supplements. You mentioned earlier, for example, you're giving vitamin B12 injections at a therapeutic dose, so the effect is quite quick, right? So are there other cases where we want to be, instead of addressing the entire diet, we want to make a very quick change and give the dog a therapeutic dose of X, Y, or Z, so that we can make a change? For example, in my really aggressive, dangerous mare, all of a sudden, I really needed her to get back to herself quickly. So what are the kind of cases where we would look at that? And is supplements the way that we go for that? And if I also think about myself in kind of the journey of dealing with stress and fatigue and burnout, who hasn't been there? Addressing your diet is a part of that, but it can take a long time for you to be eating the right things and for that to make a difference. And so most of the time, whoever you're working with is putting you on a supplement during that interim so that you can have have the nutrient deficiencies addressed more quickly and feel better more quickly, and then over time have that added in through what you're eating instead of through the supplements, right? So do I have the right idea there?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, there is definitely a place for supplementation. And, you know, more often than not, you know, if I think with nutrient deficiencies, because they can take such a period of time for them to appear, it becomes that chronic condition, doesn't it? So it's not necessarily, you know, suddenly, you know, your dog, for example, was fine yesterday and then today is attacking everybody that comes, you know, if that occurred, then there would be some serious neurological issues to consider. But I suppose it would just become, you know, over time it might be apparent. But then, you know, in terms of pain in those chronic conditions, then you do have that low level over a period of time. And I suppose in that respect, you then have the same capacity to say, well, okay, we can introduce it back into the diet and just monitor it over a period of time. But equally, if there is an acute onset, then that's really when, you know, in discussion with your vet and the practitioner, to consider, you know, how you would supplement. Because I mean, there are many supplements that do have safe margins, but then equally, you know, going down maybe fat soluble vitamins and other supplements, then, you know, the margins aren't that safe and you do have the risk of toxicity. So it's always really important. And sometimes, you know, it's how it all interacts and how they all work together. So it might not even be the nutrient that you think. So that's why it's really important to kind of get, if you think there are deficiencies, get a baseline with vets, and then you can work off that really.
Okay, I like it. So we've spoken quite a bit about aggression, but the other thing that we're often dealing with is when we need to put dogs on rest. And sometimes that's really high drive, very energetic dogs. Is there something we can do to help calm them down and just support us in that period of time where we actually need them to have less energy and be a little bit more calm and collected, and then they can go back to being their crazy, fun-loving selves, right? Is there something we can do from a nutrition standpoint?
I mean, there are, if you are looking at this sort of, you know, high energy, hyperactive dog, then there's generally a lot of other things to consider as well. But you know, if there are concerns that it is potentially linked to the diet that you're feeding, then, you know, obviously a whole food diet, we do see does sort of calm them down, for a very simplistic way of putting it. But for those dogs, I think actually nutrition, and it becomes more of an enrichment activity which we can use, because with one of the major parts of communication between the gut and the brain is the vagus nerve, and that is the chief of the parasympathetic nervous system. So the parasympathetic nervous system is part of the stress response, so that's where you'll probably know it. So the sympathetic nervous system deals with our fight and flight. So that's what sort of kicks in when we're exposed to a stressor. And then the parasympathetic nervous system, I always try and remember the difference of a parachutist, like really slowly coming down to the ground, just to remember the difference. So that is our rest and digest. So the vagus nerve is the chief of the parasympathetic nervous system. So if we're thinking about these dogs that we're working with, and we really want them to engage that parasympathetic nervous system, we want them to calm down, we want them to be quiet, we want them to rest, we want them to digest, then chewing is actually a really, really good mechanism to encourage that. So then when we're looking at our whole food nutrition, if we are giving them opportunities to chew and to actually, you know, like as humans, you know, when we're stressed and we just feel like we're shoveling food down our throat, and someone says, just chew your food. So actually we can use nutrition in that respect. So it's not about giving them a bowl that they literally inhale and then it's like, so where's the rest of it? It's actually about using nutrition in its whole food form to activate that vagus nerve, to engage that rest and digest system. So, you know, bones are a really good way of doing that, but also like Kongs and things, you know, so all those enrichment activities that we tell people to do to help our dogs rest and, you know, rest rest and recover, there's actually a biological and biochemical reason why we do that. You know, it's not just because, well, they're getting bored. It's no, actually, you know, we can activate that system. And actually through chewing, they do release endorphins, which, as we know, do have pain relieving capabilities. So we're actually if we are looking at, you know, rest and rehab, then we are looking at those feel good sort of, you know, hormones there. So chewing is a really good thing to offer. So in that respect, definitely looking at a nutrient dense diet, because again, if we're looking at recovery, then if we've got trauma to the area, then we need that repair, we need that healing. So we need new tissues, new cells to be produced, and largely that needs protein. So we need protein in the diet, we need it utilized, and they need to be able to then, you know, turn it around and convert it into new proteins to heal. So again, you know, that nutrient dense diet is really important to support that healing process, but we can use nutrition as enrichment as well.
I love that. I love that so much. Okay. So Meg has asked a question here, which veers off of the behavior topic. So naughty Meg. But before we ask that, I am going to just remind you guys that you can win that animal therapy business planner. All you need to do is send us a photo in the comments of your diary with the 13th of November blocked off. And I know you guys have blocked it off because I've told you to so many times already. And I know you've done it because you definitely want to be live with us. It's not a day you're going to miss. I also know that your diary is very close to you. It's either right here on your phone, so you can just take a screenshot, or it's like next to you in the car while you're listening, or it's on your desk. So come on, guys, send us those pictures, okay, so that we can see that you're joining us. Okay, cool. So Megan says she wants to know if you're aware of any studies in animals that link vitamin D deficiency with tendon issues. So her 6-year-old has what's called short Achilles syndrome, and the pediatrician has diagnosed a vitamin D deficiency. And within 3 weeks of supplementing her, she was no longer walking on her toes and has no symptoms. So yeah,
wow.
What do you think of that?
Wow. I mean, this is what's amazing with nutrition, because nothing ever surprises me. You know, every nutrient has so many different jobs to do in the body, and this is actually where it can get really complex, because and that's what we're saying about supplementation, because you might sort of think, okay, well, that nutrient is linked with this, but then actually, you know, when you find a few studies down a rabbit hole that you end up, you're like, oh, well, actually it's a different nutrient, and they all work so beautifully together in the body. It can be really hard to pinpoint, but that is really interesting. It doesn't surprise me, because like vitamin D, I mean, the sad thing is the majority of us are vitamin D deficient, you know, and, you know, it's just the way we don't spend as much time out in the sun. So a lot of us are vitamin D deficient, and especially in the UK, you know, we are advised to supplement our diet. But yeah, that's really interesting. I will take a look if I can find any studies. People always take the mick out of me. I'm like the Rolodeck of studies. So I'll have a look and see what I can find. I mean, it doesn't surprise me in any sort of way, shape or form. So yeah, really interesting.
I like it. Okay, cool. Thank you for that. And then we have someone else who has said that raw feeding his dogs or her dogs has improved their health, and raw meaty bones are great for teeth, brain activity, and concentric exercise. So really awesome. I like it.
Yeah, I love raw. It's just, you know, it's literally not even about bashing foods. It's just, okay, what does this animal in front of me need? You know, what are their nutritional needs, and how can I best give them that, and how can they best utilize it?
Do you guys want to give us a show of hand who uses raw, who feeds raw? I'd love to see. I did at a point, but I don't anymore. It's a little bit hard to source out in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, it's so expensive, so I had to stop. I did it for a short while. I have a German Shepherd with arthritis. Jasmine, yes. Guys, hands up. I want to see who feeds raw. I want to really know. That's really interesting. And there's so much controversy around it, right? So, yeah, but we won't go into that today. That's a conversation for another day. Lisa, while everyone is telling us what they feed or don't feed, Please tell us a little bit about your course, because you have a course and a lot of people are raving about it. And that's actually why we have you here, because one of our members said, please get Lisa on. So thank you. So please tell us a little bit more about it, and where we can learn more.
So the the course, which I'm really, I'm over the moon to hear such good feedback about it. It's always a bit of a worry, when you've done something and you just kind of push it and then think, oh, but so that's really nice to hear. So yeah, the Canine Nutrition course is the first Ofqual regulated. So it's the IPET Network Level 3 Diploma in Canine Nutrition. So I co-authored that. So we started writing it last year. Jackie Byrne, she's a registered vet nurse. She was co-author on it as well. And the idea with the course is because, I mean, everybody is so interested in nutrition, and in the pet world, we possibly don't pay it as much attention as we should. A lot more traction is gaining with it. But a lot of people are really interested in learning more, and everyone kind of takes to Google, and then, very soon you can find a diploma for like £25, and, everybody's not really sure, what sort of stuff they'll be covering. And equally, there isn't a regulated qualification. And what we mean by a regulated qualification is that the qualification is the standard no matter where it's delivered. So like when you go to school and when you go to college, that the qualification is at a certain standard. And that doesn't exist anywhere else in terms of nutrition. So that was the point. It's Ofqual regulated, which is the office in sort of the UK, England, sorry. So IPET Network, they are international. So we have actually thrown out to it's global. There are students over in Canada, which is amazing. And it is, again, it's looking actually at the nutritional needs of the dog. So what does the dog actually need? What do they need to survive? And what do the nutrients actually do in the body? So, we do have a module on pet foods and the different pet foods available, but the bare bones of it is actually, what do dogs need? Because that's what it comes down to, isn't it? So we have a module on life stage and development, so what they need from puppies right up into the aging dog, and how we can support like cognitive decline in the aging dog. And then the other module, which I wrote, so I love it, it's about the microbiome. So how the microbiome does actually influence behaviour and also immunity. So yeah, that's sort of my little research area. I've got a real thing about the microbiome. So and then the final module is a research project. So learners can choose to research an area that's particularly interesting to them and their practice. And the whole point of that is that, because it's such a wealth of people who do the course, they will all have different backgrounds. And they will all need nutrition for very different reasons. So for example, a rehabber, you might be looking at nutrition in pain, or how you can use nutrition to support rehabilitation. So that was the point, really, that it is very applicable to practice. So how we look at the research available and how we then apply it to practice, because that's what it's all about.
I like it. So I've had quite a few people say that they feed raw, so that's quite awesome.
Wow.
And Yasmin actually says that she's busy with her iPet coursework now, but watching this counts as studying. So good job.
Yes, it does.
She's been a big raw fan for a while now, but your course, Lisa, is giving her a much more in-depth understanding of the relationship between nutrition and musculoskeletal health. So that's amazing.
And link between the microbiome and the skeleton, musculoskeletal health, which is just amazing.
And then Lisa Prestwood says that she can't feed 100% raw. It makes tracking very difficult. So are you talking about tracking like track work, like the sports tracking? Is that what you're referring to? Because that's quite interesting.
That is very interesting.
Cool. And Sophie Mallow says she's trying to transition to raw or gently cooked, currently doing what is feasible, half kibble and half freeze-dried raw plus supplements. So yeah, good job.
I think that is, that's really important as well. It's finding that balance and finding what works for you. And it's just about making it achievable and, doing the best for your pets with what you've got.
Okay. So Lisa says, yes, the dog sport. That's so cool.
Interesting.
Very cool. Yeah, that's really amazing. Thank you so much, Lisa. So if you guys are I'm going to give you a little bit more chance to post those pictures for us. So if you're watching as a recording, please share your pictures in the comments. We will be following up and we will be choosing a winner when we have some entries, guys. Come on. I want to see those diary photos, please.
I really want one. I might enter. Am I allowed to enter?
I'm going to enter. I'm definitely because I want one. Yeah.
It looks fab. It does.
It does. Cool. Guys, thank you so much. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us. Have a wonderful day, everyone.